Welcome to Liberty, Leadership, and Lies, the podcast where we unravel the complex web of politics, power, and deception. Each week, we dive into the stories behind the headlines, exploring how liberty is eroded and the selfishness of our political leaders, as well as the lies that shape our world. Join us as we dissect the truth from fiction by examining the tactics used by the new aristocracy, the political class, at the local, state, and national levels of government as we dare to challenge the status quo. Get ready for thought-provoking discussions, exclusive interviews, and a journey into the heart of what really drives our society. Liberty, Leadership, and Lies, where your understanding of the world begins to change. Tune in every Monday morning and prepare to see beyond the veil.
Well, I was going to say good morning, but it really isn't a good morning. So, a somber and resolved greeting to you all this week, ladies and gentlemen. Like most of you, I've spent time processing the events of the past week. Turns out that most of my processing means that this will be a longer than normal episode. And like most of the people in my regular audience, I'm not ashamed to say that I was brought to tears many times the past few days. I'm still processing why I would cry over the death of a man that I had never met. I think that I know, and there are many reasons. I weep over the loss of a husband and father, murdered on the world stage, and make no mistake about it, he was assassinated by an evil left-wing ideology. I cry because those two babies, while they will someday learn about what a wonderful human being their father was, and the inspiration he served to millions of young people around the nation, around the world, all they know right now is that their daddy is no longer here in the world with them. Their sweet mother told their young daughter that their daddy was on a work trip with Jesus. Sad. I cry for the loss of a man who is unashamedly sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ with many. And like his wife Erica said, he helped to fill heaven during his altogether much too short time on earth. I cry because I am witnessing the depths of depravity that the demonic acolytes of left-wing ideology are showing in their celebration of this assassination. I weep because our republic lost one of the greatest apologists for Christianity that I was witness to for this current generation, as well as the greatest apologist for liberty in our great nation. Charlie Kirk was snatched away from us by an ideology that only knows hate and will silence anybody that opposes them. Charlie Kirk was murdered because he was effective at winning people for Christ and for deprogramming the left-wing ideology that is present in our nation's colleges and universities. Most of all, I weep because of the profound change that I feel that is about to happen in our nation. You know, Charlie Kirk founded the organization Turning Point USA. And it's ironic that it's through his murder that is quite apparent we have now reached that turning point in our republic. My feeds all across my social media accounts can be summed up in two categories ever since that bullet ended a life filled with hope, promise, and faith. One category of responses are the shock, disbelief, condolences, prayers for the tragedy, and a resolve to continue Charlie's mission. In the words of Ben Shapiro, we are going to pick up that bloody microphone and continue where Charlie left off. Now, the other category, it's filled with vitriol and hate, along with a celebration of silencing a young man that cheerfully brought a message of hope and joyfulness everywhere he went. I have seen the label of conservative activist applied to Charlie on both sides of the political spectrum these days, and I believe that doesn't capture the entire picture. At all of Charlie's talks, debates, and appearances, they all had a common theme. He spoke about the way, the truth, and the life of Jesus Christ. It just so happens that those topics closely align with conservatism in our republic. Unlike the demonic acolytes that celebrate his death, who only spout a message that is in complete opposition to the message Charlie spread. Now, it's a demonic message, by the way, that is completely antithetical to what this nation was founded upon. So if I get weepy during this episode, please understand why. I have listened to or read other people explore the reasons why they are profoundly saddened by this event, and it's helped me to process or explore my responses. But at its foundation, it isn't because I was close to or had even met Charlie Kirk. It is because I, as well as many of you, witnessed the manifestation of evil and the lengths it will go to so that it can silence the voices opposed to that evil. So again, I hope you bear with me because this is an important message and why I included righteous anger in the title of this week's show, because that is what I am feeling as well. But just what is righteous anger? Trust me, as I'm grappling with my physical, emotional, and spiritual response to this heinous act, I've gone down many rabbit holes in exploring the effect this is having on me. And maybe through this monologue today, it can help us all as we dig into how we are responding to or will respond to this latest display of evil in our republic. So after doing some digging, let me summarize what I believe righteous anger is, which is also sometimes called holy anger or just indignation. Righteous anger refers to a form of anger that is morally justified, directed toward wrongdoing, injustice, or evil, and motivated by a desire for righteous or ethical, or not ethnical, but ethical correction rather than personal vengeance or selfishness. It's contrasted with unrighteous or sinful anger, which might stem from pride, impatience, or uncontrolled emotions, which I'm not proud to say was one of my initial responses to the murder of Charlie. The concept of righteous anger appears across philosophy, psychology, and especially religious or faith-based traditions, where it is seen as a virtuous response when aligned with higher principles. So please keep that in mind throughout this week's show, folks. I know I'm not perfect. There's only been one perfect person. But what I do and how I respond to this evil, I'm still processing and prayerfully considering continuously. Moving on, though, to the events of last week. In addition to remembering the attacks on our republic, on the 24th anniversary of 9/11, our Judeo-Christian founded nation is confronting a national tragedy that it cuts deep. And it's echoing the evil we mourned from 24 years ago. But I believe that as a nation, we seem to have forgotten that evil is still among us. And it will be here until the end of the age. Our response to it is how we move forward. That evil, though, it isn't coming from far off lands this time. It is right here among us, and it has taken root in the ripe breeding grounds of public schools as well as colleges and universities across the land, where our impressionable children are taught what to think and how to behave. It is an evil that is incubated by the adherents of left-wing ideology in the media and in our government. It is still hard to believe that just a few short days ago, we lost an unashamed proclaimer of the gospel of Jesus Christ and a voice that was leading people out of that wicked ideology. A single shot struck this young man who was once again in the belly of the beast during a student Q&A session. Now, Utah Governor Spencer Cox called it a political assassination. It is, but it was also a religious assassination. He also called it a dark day for our state and a tragic day for our nation. President Trump, he ordered flags at half-staff, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu mourned Kirk as a lion-hearted friend of Israel. Now, those are all accurate descriptions or actions that should be taken, but we are stopping short of what is actually needed. And what is needed is a righteous anger response to the evil that walks among us and primarily targets our youth with their poison. Righteous anger, ladies and gentlemen. So please stay with me as I honor Charlie this day and every day going forward. We honor him with truth, We honor him with our righteous anger. We honor him by exposing the lies about this evil left-wing ideology. A peaceful society cannot coexist with this evil. We must root it out, much as our founders did against tyranny when they began this republic.
Hey there, truth seekers. I'm Larry Litton, your guide through the maze of modern politics and power dynamics on Liberty, Leadership, and Lies. Each episode will challenge the narratives, expose the lies, and celebrate the leaders who champion true liberty. Get ready to question, learn, and maybe even change your mind. So let's dive into the truth together.
All right, folks, here we go. With his assassin in custody, and we are waiting to get the full details behind his motivation, understand this. Understand that the primary motivation, not the little details behind it that we're finding out right now, the killer's primary motivation was to silence this brilliant young man who not only unashamedly proclaimed the gospel to millions of young people across the nation and the world, but was more importantly one of the biggest influences upon a generation of people who are taught to hate their gender, hate their country, and hate anybody with a point of view different than the left-wing ideology being forced down everybody's throats by the demonic culture of death and servitude to government. Charlie, 31, husband, father of two, and founder of Turning Point USA, as I said, was not only a titan for conservative values, but a bold proclaimer of the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ. He was rallying millions of young Americans against the radical left's agenda. His America Comeback Tour launched at UVU, where 3,000 students parked the venue for his Prove Me Wrong table, where they were debating trans issues, election integrity, and faith. He was answering a question on mass shootings, specifically trans shooters, when the bullet hit. It's a chilling irony because, according to recently revealed information, the shooter was living with his gay lover who was, quote unquote, transitioning to female. You know, videos capture the horror, and I'm not going to retell it, and the ensuing manhunt and the capture of the evil acolyte of the transgender ideology. One thing is for sure, though, and that is the obvious primary motivation behind his assassination. This demonic violence from the left is shredding our society, and I will proclaim this continuously. A peaceful, God-fearing society can no longer exist with this evil left-wing ideology and its adherents. This isn't politics. This was a satanic assault on truth, order, and God's design. All of it fueled by lies branding patriots like Charlie as a fascist, Nazi, homophobe, transphobe, and any other special category phobe the lefties scream at these days. They brand people with opposing views as enemies. Ephesians 6:12 warns of principalities, powers, and rulers of darkness. How can we live beside those people that are glorifying this murder as progress? Charlie, just weeks ago, decried the slaying of the Ukrainian refugee Irina Zalutska and was warning of free speech threats. Now he's silenced. The killer of that young lady, caught on video saying not once but 2 times, quote, "I got that white girl." And that is being denied by leaders of the Democratic Party in the media. You know, President Trump called Charlie a martyr for truth. He's also a martyr for faith. RFK Jr. said, quote, "Once again, a bullet silenced the most eloquent truth teller of an era." This echoes the 2 assassination attempts on President Trump in 2024. July 13th, Butler, Pennsylvania. Thomas Matthew Crooks, 20, fired 8 shots from a rooftop, grazing Trump's ear, killing Corey Comparatore, a father that was shielding his family and wounding 2 others. You know, Thomas Crook, fed with the left's Trump is Hitler poison, acted on hate. September 15th, West Palm Beach, Ryan Wesley Routh, 58, hid with an AK-47 scope and a GoPro so he could glorify his actions. This left-wing acolyte also had a manifesto that railed against fascists. Well, where did he get that term from? He got it from the left-wing acolytes in the mainstream media and the leaders of the Democrat Party, who are right now, with crocodile tears, calling political violence abhorrent. Yet they were the ones that lit the fuses of these ideological suicide bombers, so to speak. These are products of a left-wing culture demonizing conservatives. Kirk's sniper joins this demonic tide. Now, before I go further into the episode, I must let you all know, especially those former connections on social media, which includes some relatives, that I have now unfriended or unfollowed and blocked you. And as you will discover throughout today's episode, it is my belief that a civilized society, a constitutional republic, a God-fearing society with our governing documents founded upon a Judeo-Christian framework, we can no longer pretend that we can peacefully coexist with you. I can't stop you from listening or watching this podcast, but I can certainly divorce you from my personal life and my social media pages. I'm not through scrubbing my social media accounts at this point, but I'm making progress. So moving on, though, let's unpack the history, the targeting of conservatives and Christians, the gender ideology crisis in schools, and see those crocodile tears from the members that worship and follow this demonic ideology as they decry the very political violence they engage in with increasing frequency. In the first segment today, we will dig into the roots of this predominantly left-wing violence, its escalation, and how it culminated in Charlie Kirk's assassination. Folks, this isn't some abstract history lesson. It is the story of how a once great republic has been under siege by forces that dress up their rage as righteousness. Political violence isn't new in America. Remember, our own founding was forged in it. But the left's brand today is something darker. It is a demonic tool wielded against any whisper of dissent. It's a calculated assault on the very soul of our republic. It's not spontaneous anger. It's organized, ideological warfare, and it has been building for decades, layer by layer, until it claimed a patriot like Charlie Kirk right in front of millions of eyes. So let's go back to the 60s and 70s, a time when far-left radicals thought they could bomb their way to utopia. The Weather Underground, born from the Students for a Democratic Society splinter group, led by firebrands like Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dohrn, mentors of none other than Barack Obama, they declared war on America itself. They weren't just protesting, they were terrorists, pure and simple. Starting in 1969, after their infamous days of rage in Chicago, where they smashed windows and clashed with police, they went underground, literally. Over the next 6 years, they detonated more than 24 dynamite bombs targeting symbols of what they called imperialist power. The Capitol in 1971, the Pentagon in 1972, police stations in New York and San Francisco, you name it, they hit it. Their manifesto, you don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows. It called for a violent overthrow of the government to smash racism and the Vietnam War. They killed innocents along the way. A night watchman at the University of Wisconsin in 1979, where a bomb they planted in an Army research lab exploded, ripping through the building and claiming his life. Then there was Greenwich Village townhouse explosion in March 1970, where 3 of their own, including Bill Ayers' own girlfriend, Diana Alton, were blown to bits while mixing dynamite in a basement. Even in death, they romanticized it as revolutionary sacrifice. And the media? No, they ate it up. Instead of correctly branding them as terrorists, outlets like the New York Times profile them as idealistic youth driven by moral fury against the war machine. Ayers himself, he dodged serious charges thanks to FBI overreach scandals. And by the 80s, he is a tenured professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago, lecturing on education reform while unrepentant about his bombings. Dohrn, she became a law professor too, even after the FBI listed her as one of their most wanted. This wasn't justice. It was absolution for the less violent vanguard, setting a template, blow up the system. And if you're on the right side of history, the press will polish your halo. It normalized the idea that violence against conservatives, police, law and order, and institutions was just passionate resistance. That seed, planted in the counterculture soil, sprouted into the weeds choking our society today. Fast forward to the Obama years, and you see the roots taking hold in plain sight. The 2011 Occupy Wall Street movement started as a critique of corporate greed, fair enough on the surface, but it quickly devolved into a carnival of chaos that emboldened the far left fringe. Encampments in Zuccotti Park turned into semi-permanent squats with protesters assaulting police officers. Hey, I thought that was bad, you January 6th insurrectionist. Trashing businesses and turning public spaces into no-go zones. Remember the examples? In New York, occupiers hurled bottles and concrete at NYPD officers during evictions, leading to over 700 arrests on the Brooklyn Bridge alone in October 2011. In Oakland, they shut down ports, costing millions of dollars, and clashed with police officers using improvised weapons, rocks, fireworks rigs as explosives. One study even found attitudes among Occupy participants leading towards justifying violence against police as a tool for change. The media, they framed it as anti-1% populism, downplaying the assaults on officers and property damage. What did they do with January 6th? Protesters got sympathetic profiles, cops were overreacting, and from those ashes rose Antifa, the black bloc anarchists with their masks, Molotov cocktails, and iron-fisted ideology, targeting fascists, which meant anyone right of center, from Proud Boys to your average Trump voter. They became the shock troops of the left, doxing conservatives, smashing windows at speeches, and laying the groundwork for what exploded in 2020. 2020. That was the turning point, too. The inferno where this violence went mainstream. Sparked by George Floyd's death, the overdosed drug peddler, counterfeit passer, hold a gun to his pregnant woman's belly. The Black Lives Matter protests morphed into a summer-long orgy of destruction, with Antifa and far-left agitators hijacking the narrative. Cities burned. Portland, Oregon, for over 100 consecutive nights. Federal courthouses under siege with lasers blinding officers and fireworks exploding like grenades. Minneapolis, $500 million in damages alone. Entire blocks reduced to ash after rioters torched a police precinct and looted stores. Kenosha, Wisconsin saw Kyle Rittenhouse, a 17-year-old defending himself against a gun-toting mob and a skateboarder-wielding attacker, vilified as a white supremacist, while the real aggressors got a pass. Dozens died in the chaos. 25 lives lost nationwide, including David Dorn, a retired black police captain, gunned down while guarding a pawn shop in St. Louis. Aaron J. Danielson, a Trump supporter, executed in Portland by Antifa activist Michael Rainhall, who bragged about it before the feds took him down. Billions in total losses, estimates of over $2 billion, thousands injured, including hundreds of cops. Yet CNN's infamous fiery but mostly peaceful chyron scrolled as flames lit up the skyline behind the reporter, mocking the devastation. DHS and FBI reports from 2023 onward flagged this as left-wing organized violence. Arson waves, assault on law enforcement, even autonomous zones like Seattle's CHOP, where 2 teens were gunned down amid the peaceful occupation. But January 6th, that one riot twisted into an existential insurrection by the same media that called left-wing riots protest, dominates headlines while Portland's 100-day siege gets a footnote. It's selective outrage, folks. A demonic double standard that excuses one side's firebombs as justice and demonizes the other's prayers as threats. Trump's 2024 reelection victory, that was the match to the gasoline. The left, seething over their blue wave dreams dash, inflamed the powder keg. Congressional hearings in early 2025 exposed a rash of attacks on conservative events. Pipe bombs at RNC rallies in Milwaukee and Charlotte, initially blamed on MAGA chaos, but traced to left-wing agitators with Antifa ties. Riley Gaines in 2023 became a symbol, ambushed by a mob of trans activists at San Francisco State University for daring to defend women's sports. They punched her in the face, bloodied her, barricaded her in a room for 3 hours, yet the university condemned her for provoking them. Churches, bastions of Christian resistance, faced the brunt. God is trans graffiti scrawled on a Nashville cathedral in 2024, echoing the demonic mockery of faith. A Philadelphia church firebombed in 2024 for opposing drag queen story hours, flames licking the steeple as the arsonist fled. Now get this one. April 2025, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's mansion torched. Anti-conservative graffiti like Zionist pigs spread by pro-Hamas radicals who saw his pro-Israel stance as betrayal. June 2025, Minnesota Rep. Melissa Hartman, a moderate Christian bucking her party on trans youth bills, watched her home erupt in flames, her husband gravely wounded, the attacker screaming bigot from the shadows. These weren't random. They were hits on symbols of traditional values. The left's way of saying resist us and we'll burn it down. Trump's 2 assassination attempts in 2024 foreshadowed Charlie's fate like storm clouds before a hurricane. The first July 13th one in Butler, Pennsylvania, where Thomas Crooks, radicalized by endless Trumpist Hitler tropes from the likes of AOC and MSNBC, crawled up on that roof and fired 8 shots, killing a hero, a heroic father who dove to shield his family and critically wounding others. Now, of course, there were Secret Service failures and no drone surveillance despite request, and they ignored warnings about Crooks scouting the site days earlier, siloed communications between the local police officers and feds, and they left the roof unguarded. The final task force report slammed it. 10 denied asset requests, including counter snipers, with leadership stunningly absent with no clear chain of command. You know, there were whispers of Iranian plots intertwined with domestic hate, but the root cause? It's that relentless, evil left-wing rhetoric painting Trump as a fascist threat to democracy, priming unstable minds for action. President Trump's defiant fist pump, fight, 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 it rallied the nation, but it exposed the rot. Then September 15th in Florida, Ryan Wesley Roof, a 58-year-old Ukrainian war enthusiast turned anti-Trump fanatic, hid in the bushes with an AK-47, with a scope and a GoPro ready to go. His self-published book railed against Trump as a buffoon fascist. Indictments show he donated to Democrats and hated the MAGA movement with venom. These weren't isolated lunatics, ladies and gentlemen. These were the harvest of a media and political class that sows hate daily. Kirk's assassination is the pinnacle, the bloody crescendo of this symphony of savagery. September 10th, 2025 is the turning point, where that single shot slammed into Charlie's neck mid-sentence as he debated trans shooters. The left's hypocrisy is the gasoline on this fire. Biden, Obama, Newsom, everybody issued boilerplate condemnations after Charlie's murder. No place in our democracy, they intoned, faces grave on camera. Yet they excuse Antifa riots as understandable frustration, firebombing as cries for help, assaults as self-defense against systemic oppression. Antifa's 2020 Portland execution of Danielson, crickets from the White House, while they fund bailed the killers. Gaines's beating at SFSU, university administration lectured her on tolerance. This selective blindness is the demonic spirit our founders faced head on. The same tyranny that sparked the revolution. The Revolutionary War was political violence at its rawest. Lexington and Concord in 1775, where Minutemen fired the shot heard around the world against British redcoats marching to seize powder and arms. The brutal winter at Valley Forge in 1777 to 1778, where George Washington's ragged army starved and froze but held. Yorktown in 1781, the siege that broke the empire's back. This war was against British tyranny, which was taxation without representation, quartering soldiers in homes, dissolving colonial legislatures, crushing liberty under the boot of King George. The Declaration of Independence didn't mince words. When a government becomes destructive of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government. That war, costing 25,000 American lives, birthed our republic on the altar of resistance, was righteous anger. Today's left-wing violence, snipers, firebombs, riots, it's the same tyranny, but in progressive drag, destroying rights under the guise of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Charlie's death, like Paul Revere's midnight ride warning the British are coming, screams, "The enemy is here and is inside the gates." From Representative Steve Scalise' 2017 near fatal shooting at a congressional baseball practice by a Bernie bro to Charlie's sniper scope glinting in the Utah sun, the body count rises relentlessly. Comparatory selfless sacrifice in Butler, the innocents mowed down in Portland streets, the churchgoers scarred by arson, the children lost to transgender shooters. We've lost too many. Patriots, fathers, truth tellers like Charlie, the innocent children in schools all across the country, they are now silenced forever. But now, in Charlie's absence, we must amplify his voice. We need more truth tellers, not fewer. Leaders who call this evil by name and who arm our resolve as fiercely as our founders did. Charlie wasn't just a commentator. He was a shepherd for the youth, turning campuses from woke indoctrination camps into arenas of free thought. His blood demands we fight on, exposing the lies, reclaiming our republic. Because if we don't, the specter won't vanish. It'll multiply. They may have silenced that messenger, but they cannot silence that message. I'll be right back. All right, folks, let's zero in again. Conservatives and Christians are under siege in this nation. A relentless barrage that is not just rhetorical, but increasingly deadly. And at the heart of it all is this evil and demonic gender ideology crisis that's claiming our kids' lives in the most horrific ways. Charlie Kirk was right in the thicket debating this very poison when that sniper's bullet cut him down. He was talking about trans shooters, no less, as if fate was underscoring the urgency of his words. It's no coincidence. This is the front line where traditional values clash with a radical agenda that's tearing families apart and filling graveyards. Conservatives have become the left's ultimate boogeyman, branded as Hitler or fascist, racist, sexist, homophobes, transphobes, basically any slur that sticks to us and paints us as existential threats to their vision of progress. And Charlie, he embodied the fight like nobody else. He was a joyful warrior, an unashamed proclaimer and defender of the gospel of Jesus Christ. At just 21 years of age, so young, he built Turning Point USA into a juggernaut with over 2,500 chapters, growing now exponentially as we speak. He built it on campuses across America, turning indoctrination mills into battlegrounds for free thought. TPUSA wasn't just rallies, it was debates on borders, exposing how open border policies flood communities with crime and drugs. Talk about elections, calling out fraud that erodes trust in our constitutional republic. We talked about gender, challenging the notion that boys can become girls overnight with a pronoun swap. Charlie cheerfully went directly into the belly of the beast to spread this message about God and the unique greatness of our republic. He mobilized millions of young people. He helped swing the 2024 election for Trump by getting Gen Z to the polls in record numbers. But that made him a target. His prove me wrong tables invited confrontation, and the demonic left answered with fury. He was assassinated. He was martyred. Why? Because he was effective. Look at the warnings we ignored. In 2023, Heritage Foundation President Kevin Roberts sounded the alarm on surging left-wing violence, pointing to organized threats against conservative speakers and events. The media, they dismissed it as right-wing paranoia, twisting his words to make him the villain. Again, remember Portland in 2020. Antifa militants executed Mr. Jay Danielson, a Patriot Prayer supporter, in cold blood on the streets during one of their mostly peaceful riots. Michael Reynald, the shooter, bragged about it online before being killed in a standoff. Yet the left lionized him as a hero in some circles. Then recently, during the 2025 No Kings protests in Salt Lake City, a wave of anti-conservative fury that turned deadly when a rally goer was shot just blocks from where Charlie would later be murdered. FBI logs are a damning ledger. Left-wing plots from the 2017 shooting of Steve Scalise by Bernie Bros during a congressional baseball practice to eco terrorists spiking trees and bombing pipelines, and now Charlie shooter. Trump's attempts, well, they were the blueprint. Thomas Crooks, 20-year-old radicalized by endless Trumpist Hitler tropes from the media echo chamber. Ryan Ralph, the anti-Trump zealot obsessed with Ukraine. All of this. And then Heritage reports that our conservatives are facing militant left-wing terrorism constantly. Doxing that exposes families to threats, drive-by shootings at rallies, all primed by inflammatory rhetoric. It's not random. It's a pattern of elimination. Charlie's assassin, was this really just a lone wolf fueled by online hate forums? Time will tell. And sources within the FBI have told a prominent conservative commentator that they have not ruled out the possibility that the young man acted alone. Christians, meanwhile, are facing a holy war, a spiritual blitzkrieg where the left's militant secularism brands our faith as the ultimate oppression, especially on gender, life, and marriage. It's not subtle. It's a crusade to erase God from public life. Churches are to face coast to coast. God is trans, scrawled in blood red paint on Nashville cathedrals, mocking the divine. Repent bigots spray painted across Southern Baptist sanctuaries from Alabama to Texas. The Covenant School Massacre in Nashville, March 2023, where trans identified Audrey Hale, a former student seething with resentment, stormed the Christian elementary school armed with an AR-15 and 2 handguns, killing 6. 3 of them 9-year-old children in a targeted attack. Her manifesto, leaked despite efforts to suppress it, revealed a toxic brew of hate, rants against white privilege, Christians as oppressors, and fantasies of vengeance fueled by gender rejection. Her mental illness caused her to believe she was a man, and she changed her name to Aiden. And her writings showed obsession with fame, suicidal ideation, and a psychotic break, planning the attack for years, even drawing maps of the school. Hale's rage is dysphoria, classing with a Christian upbringing that didn't affirm her delusion, turning inward turmoil outward into bloodshed. June 2025, Minnesota Rep. Melissa Hortman's home firebombed after she a moderate with Christian roots, voted against radical trans youth bills. Her husband gravely wounded as flames engulfed their garage. The attacker yelled, "Christian hate kills," from the shadows, while showcasing that it is the demonic left wing ideology that just committed that horrific act. The Anti Defamation League reports anti religious hate crimes spiking with anti Christian incidents up 30% since 2023, often linked to left wing extremism, the demonic. Although the ADL focuses more on anti Semitism, FBI data shows religion based hate hitting record highs, with Christians bearing a growing share amid this culture war. It's terrorism, plain and simple. Media paints Christians and conservatives as bigots, the radicals like the fuses. This leads straight to the gender dysphoria and its fueling school violence. It's a heartbreaking epidemic where confusion becomes carnage. Gender dysphoria, that profound distress from a perceived mismatch between biological sex and internal identity, it is a real affliction, and it's a heartbreaking mental illness, which is often rooted in trauma, abuse, or mental health woes. But the left's, the evil left-wing ideology of affirmation-only model, affirmation at all costs, and labeling it gender-affirming care, is done by rushing kids into hormones, puberty blockers, and surgeries without exhaustive therapy. That only exacerbates the turmoil, turning vulnerability into volatility. Studies scream the risks. Transgender youth face suicide attempt rates over 40%, quadruple that of their unaffected peers. A 2023 study linked parental support to slashing suicide ideation by half. Parental support, not parental affirmation. Yet schools hide transitions from moms and dads, prioritizing pronouns over protection. Untreated dysphoria plus ideological rage, fed by online echo chambers vilifying another one of those made-up words, cis normativity, it turns inward pain deadly, with comorbidities ignored in the rush to affirm or die. The uptick among dysphoric individuals as mass shooters is alarming. It is a red flag waving, and that flag is dripping with blood that we can no longer ignore. Cases pile up like tragic dominoes. September 2018, Aberdeen, Maryland. Snochia Mosley, 26, identifying as a transgender and struggling with hormone therapy amid mental illness, stormed a Rite Aid distribution center with a 9mm handgun, killing 3 coworkers and wounding 3 before turning the gun on herself. Friends described her as shocked by rejection, her gender dysphoria intertwined with diagnosed schizophrenia, leading to a breakdown where she targeted those around her in rage. May 2019, STEM School, Highlands Ranch, Colorado. Alec McKinney, a 16-year-old trans-identified teen, teamed up with Devin Erickson to open fire, killing 1 student who charged the shooters and wounding 8 others. McKinney, now serving a life sentence in prison, cited bullying over his transition and identity struggles as fuel, pleading guilty to murder while testifying about the pact to make them pay. March 2023, we already discussed the Nashville Covenant shooter, Audrey Hale. Her journals, obsessed over Christian family rejection and imaginary penis anguish and suicidal plans, killing 3 small children and 3 adults in a manifesto-fueled rampage against little crackers and faith. Now, Hale, like I mentioned, identified as Hayden, spent years planning this atrocity, driven by a desire for fame and hate for her upbringing. Just a month ago, in August, Minneapolis Annunciation Catholic Robin Westman, 23, trans-identified, threw stained glass during Mass, killing 2 kids, an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, and wounding 17, which includes 14 other children. That Transgenders Journal revealed psychotic obsession with mass shooters like Adam Lanza, racist scrawls like Jew gas on guns, anti Trump vitriol, and dysphoria fueled rage against oppressive faith. Just weeks ago, Madison's Abundant Life Christian shooter, Natalie Samantha Rupinall's journal linked dysphoria to targeting the Conservative Academy and online extremism ties to the other transgender shooter in Nashville, where this confused individual killed a teacher and a student and wounded 6 others. Why schools? The left, the evil left, they vilify Christian and conservative education as bastions of hate, indoctrinating dysphoric radicals online to view vengeance as justice. Charlie Kirk debated this. Trans shooters rising before being silenced. His blood is a stark warning. The lies, safe and loving transitions fix everything. The truth, treat the mental illness without affirming it and forcing people to participate in the mental illness. WPATH scandals expose it. Leaked files show suppression of research on harms, with clinicians admitting rushed care despite regrets, even influencing WHO guidelines to downplay risks. The attacks on Trump's life, once again, they tie in, folks. Radicals see him as the anti-trans icon. His policies a bulwark against this madness. Protect our kids, ban these experiments on minors, fund real therapy, and root out the indoctrination. Charlie Kirk's murder, it screams from the grave. Defend faith, armed vigilance, because this siege won't end until we end it. And before we wrap up this segment, I need to address another local incident that ties directly into this demonic assault on our values. It was a blatant attempt to subvert a sacred institution right here in Sevier County. Just recently, a group called Severe LGBTQ plus Neighbors, which is just another alphabet mafia group, tried to pull a fast one on American Legion Post 104 in Sevierville. They rented the post hall, claiming it was for a business meeting of 5 to 10 people. Sounds innocent enough, right? But thanks to a social media post that tipped off your humble host, I discovered the truth. The so-called meeting was a full-blown drag show planned at the Post address on Dolly Parton Parkway. So let's break this down. Severe LGBTQ plus Neighbors, formed in 2023 to push events like their Equality Fest, could not find other venues in Sevier County to host their drag show. Why? Because local businesses and venues grounded in our community's traditional values said no to this agenda. So what did they do? They lied. They signed a contract with Post 104 under false pretenses, claiming a small business meeting only to plan and advertise a spectacle that mocks the very principles the American Legion stands for: service to God and country. This isn't just a breach of contract. It's a deliberate attempt to infiltrate and desecrate a veteran space, a place where heroes gather, where military mementos honor sacrifice, not sequins and performative ideology. When a friend alerted me to that social media post, I knew we couldn't let this stand. Sevier County is a Christian, conservative place. It's a home for American values. It is a place of faith, family, and patriotism, not a stage for the alphabet mafia's agenda. So I contacted the state leadership of the American Legion, and they got the ball rolling. The state's leadership acted swiftly, canceling the event because the contract was signed under those false pretenses. No drag show is scheduled to happen at Post 104, and thank God for that. You know, the American Legion, which was chartered in 1919, is the nation's largest wartime veterans organization, dedicated to advocacy, youth, and community, not to hosting events that clash with its mission of honoring service and traditional values. But here's the kicker. This isn't just about one canceled event. It's a symptom of a deeper, darker problem. Groups like Sevier County's own Alphabet Mafia, with their inclusive rhetoric, claim to want to belonging and diversity. Well, that sounds nice, but their action tells a different story. They resort to deception to push their ideology into spaces that reject it, knowing full well the backlash they'd face if they were upfront. Why lie about a business meeting? Because they knew Post 104, like most of Sevier County, wouldn't host a drag show that flaunts values at odds with the veterans' ethos. This is subversive, folks. It's a demonic viewpoint. And as I said, it's a demonic viewpoint that seeks to embed itself into every corner of traditional American life, from our schools to our veterans' halls. Now, will this cancellation lead to the political violence we've been talking about? The kind we've seen from the left, Antifa's riots, fire bombings, or the sniper who took out Charlie Kirk? Maybe, maybe not. But let's not kid ourselves. The ideology behind groups like this have a track record of violence when they don't get their way. We've covered it already. 2020 in Portland, Riley Gaines, churches defaced, Biden, Obama, Newsom all said it after Kirk's death that it has no place in our society, but it's crocodile tears, because they are silent when their side torches cities or assaults speakers. This drag show stunt wasn't violence, but it's a stealth attack on our values, a Trojan horse to normalize what Sevier County rejects. And when these subversive groups get exposed, they don't apologize. They double down, sometimes with fists, fire, or worse. The question is, how do we respond? We can't keep playing nice, hoping for peace with a side that lies to infiltrate our spaces and resorts to violence when thwarted. A peaceful society, keep this in mind, a peaceful society cannot coexist with this evil. Not when they're sneaking drag shows into veterans' halls or sniping people like Charlie Kirk. Our founders faced the same choice. The Revolutionary War was political violence brought about by righteous anger. Lexington's Minutemen, Concord's farmers, Yorktown's soldiers, they all fought against tyranny. They did not negotiate with evil. They fought because coexistence with tyranny is impossible. This declaration says it. Government, and our current government, is embedded with this evil ideology. When that government destroys rights, it is our duty to resist. Today's the left violence is that tyranny, whether it's a sniper's bullet or a deceptive contract. We stopped this drag show, but the fight's not over. I say it's time to respond in kind, not with their chaos, but with overwhelming resolve. Arm our churches, secure our posts, protect our kids. We don't stoop to their level with riots or lies, but we do stand firm. We expose their tactics and we push back harder, legally, morally, spiritually. The American Legion Post 104 stood up for what's right. We must do the same. This demonic agenda, lying to veterans, targeting our faith, targeting our children, must be met with the strength of our founders who fought for liberty. Charlie Kirk's death, this canceled drag show, the attacks on Trump, they are all battle cries. We honor those battle cries by saying no more. We honor them by finally letting our righteous anger loose on these demonic acolytes of left-wing ideology and their leaders in government, as well as their enablers in the mainstream media. No more. For those of you that have been sitting on the bench hoping that sitting together singing Kumbaya or trying to find common ground with this evil, you have to say no more too. After all, they will kill you for having the moderate position. You might as well assume the extreme position. All right, folks, we've covered the horror from Charlie Sniper to President Trump's rooftop and golf course brushes with death, the war on conservatives and Christians, the gender crisis killing our kids, and the ideology that allows criminals and murderers to roam free without consequence, while blaming their murderous actions on the very society that sought a peaceful coexistence. This violence stems from lies, the lie that we are the enemy. Tolerance silences opposition. Democrats, or left-wing leadership, they foment and enable this violence. Remember, Biden's administration fixated on MAGA threats while they let the left-wing radicals run wild. Nearly every Democrat member of Congress has called us all Nazis or fascists or existential threats to democracy. Biden himself also called us garbage. Obama called us bitter clingers to our guns and our Bibles. Hillary called us deplorables, labels that they knew would direct violence toward us. They knew their words were dehumanize Christians and conservatives in the eyes of the acolytes of left-wing evil ideology. Charlie and Donald Trump defy that. They called for us to unite and to protect our way of life. But I must emphasize, this left-wing violence is demonic. It's a force of evil a peaceful society can no longer coexist with. It's the tyranny our founders battled, just in drag. We can't compromise with darkness. We must root it out, as the revolution did against British oppression. So what are some solutions? First of all, we can expose the lies. We can rally behind Turning Point USA's legacy. You know, I watched as Erica Kirk addressed the nation the other night. I did see the steely resolve in that woman of faith. She, much as her beloved husband often did, called it correctly, and I'm going to repeat her words for my audience. She stated, quote, "The evildoers," she called it correctly, "the evildoers responsible for my husband's assassination have no idea what they've done. If you thought Charlie's mission was powerful before, you have no idea what you just unleashed." The cries of this widow will echo around the world like a battle cry. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to answer that battle cry and lock arms with each other in our righteous anger. But most of all, what we can do right now is pray. Pray because Charlie Kirk was a cheerful warrior for God. He was a joyful, unapologetic defender and proclaimer of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I've had many conversations with those I hold dear in my life, you know, my brothers, my mother, my daughter, and most especially with my bride, every day, multiple times a day since this tragedy took place. Sadly, these conversations have taken place over the phone or via FaceTime because I'm away from home and out of state working again. But like me, they have seen the glee, the celebration coming from those on the left, thinking they have silenced one of the most effective voices for Christianity and conservatism in our time. And they too are sickened by it. And like me, it has awakened in them a righteous anger. I hope this heinous act awakens the righteous anger in all of God's children, and for us to all answer the battle cry of a young widow. Erica, during that speech, also echoed Charlie's battle cry to never surrender. You know, I told my wife that I'm in a near constant state of rage. Well, not really rage, though, but righteous anger now that I've had time to consider it. But I told her that I'm in a near constant state of righteous anger and a deep and profound sadness. And since they are not emotional responses because of the loss of somebody I personally knew, I understand now they are emotional responses to what Charlie represented and what he leaves behind in this fallen world. As I have stated many times in this show, I'll do it again right now. We cannot peacefully coexist or even try to peacefully coexist with this evil, this left-wing ideology any longer. They will kill you if you are vocal and are not obedient to their desires to establish a godless, secular world. We cannot submit. We cannot surrender. We just can't believe any longer that trying to find common ground is the answer. You know, there's a person who I followed on social media and on their podcast for many years, and he said this repeatedly, The difference between conservative Christians and liberals was this. And this difference just played out on stage for the whole world to see. Conservatives think that liberals are just people with bad ideas, while liberals think conservatives are bad people with ideas. What is quite apparent now is that the liberals, these acolytes of evil left-wing ideology, will not only kill you for those ideas, but they will also gleefully celebrate your death. No more, no more, no more. This week's Wisdom from God's Word is the first time I've repeated a verse of Scripture in the history of this podcast, because it is an important message from our Lord and Savior, and it's a side of Jesus that is often never preached in the pulpits across our nation. Sadly, it is a side that isn't even preached at the church my family and I attend. Now, while my pastor did honor Charlie Kirk, the message yesterday went back to a point that I believe is going to kill us all. And despite what Charlie Kirk said about death just changing the address of a believer from here on earth to be with our Lord and Savior, it doesn't mean that we should welcome death by trying to love and understand evil. So this week's scripture once again comes to us from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 22, verse 26, where Jesus Christ is foretelling persecution. But now he that hath a purse, let him take it, and likewise his scrip. And he that hath no sword, let him sell his garment and buy one. Our God knew violence loomed, and his direction to the disciples was very clear. Be prepared, not passive. Arm yourselves not only with the truth and faith and readiness, but also a sword. Honor Charlie and fight on. A peaceful society means, or it demands, that we reject this demonic violence. I want to thank you all for leaning in today. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. You can join me on X. The handles are in the description of the show. And as always, you can visit libertyleadershipandlies.com for more. And let's keep standing in the arena for liberty, leadership, and truth. Please consider sharing this message with everyone you know. Because sitting idly by and hoping the holding hands with the enemy and trying to understand them, singing kumbaya with them, that won't save your lives. Peaceful coexistence with the enemy is not possible. God bless you. God bless Tennessee. And God bless America. Until next week. And more importantly than I have ever said it before, reveille, it's time to wake up.